Welcome to another episode of Behind the Dreamers. I'm Jennifer Loading, and we are talking to the achievers, the creators, the magic makers, and the dreamers. These are our friends, these are your friends, and they are living the extraordinary. Well, here we are, another episode of Behind the Dreamers. Have an amazing guest coming on today. Super excited to bring her on. Just to give you guys a little teaser about her, she says that after almost 25 years in a well-established corporate sales career, she left to pursue her creative endeavors with no plan except to bet on herself. Since then, she has provocatively exploring the wildest of experiences to find her new path as a more fulfilled and purposeful entrepreneur and documenting it on her podcast and blog. And so I'm excited to have her on here today. I think you guys are going to be in for a real treat. She's a lot of fun, great energy, great personality. But before we get her on here, we have to do a shout out to those sponsors. So today's episode is brought to you by Walt Mills Photography. If you are a creator needing post-production, consultation, promotion, Walt Mills is your guy. Whether short films, YouTube films, photography work, or a new headshot, he can help you find a solution to match your needs. To learn more about Walt and his work, you're going to want to go to photosbywalt.com. We also want to give a shout out to Chris Clow of Upbeat Media Productions. If you are in need of turnkey special event production, Clow is your go-to. To learn more about him and his work, you're going to want to go to upbeatmediapro.com. All right. So it's a mouthful, Allison, that I have to get out when I do those sponsors. I feel like I just need to stand up and cheer.
Clow is where you go. Clow is where you go.
Hey, I like it. Clow is where you go. Might need to be that. You're right. All right. Well, Allison Hare quit her corporate career in technology sales to become an entrepreneur, podcaster, and blogger. But she left without a plan and is documenting her journey inward by boldly creating a gutsy and full-throated, I love this, hang onto your seats adventure in her second career. She offers burnt-out professional women opportunities to interrupt their patterns and go on these experiences with her. The common theme is that my provocative conversations will always leave the listeners reflecting with a new perspective. All right, Allison, welcome to the show. Super excited to have you here today.
I'm so excited to be here. Thank you, Jennifer. Thanks for the warm welcome.
Hey, I love your bio. I just love all the verbiage in it. It's so much fun. I just like the provocatively. I like all the words that we got going here.
Just a behind the scenes thing on that, I actually did an exercise where I asked people that were either close to me or had experienced, me, and said, when I walk into a room, if you could define me, my essence in one word, what would you do? And so a lot of those words are what came out of it. And then I built the bio around it, around
That's
what
great.
you can experience.
Yeah,
so
no, that's great.
Tip if you're a creative.
Yeah. No, I think that's great. It's that back. We need market feedback, right? Like we need feedback from our market. And that's what you did. You took it and then you built your bio around it. I love it. I think the bios are so much fun too, Allison, because when you're on the other end and you get to hear somebody actually talk about you, you're like, wow, that's kind of cool, right? Like that's kind of cool.
Yeah, I think so too. It's an interesting journey into self-discovery for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, well, let's open this up because you were a corporate girl and then you decided to just kind of go a different direction. So tell us a little bit about that. What was the inspiration and just kind of what led to that?
Yeah, so I have a degree in broadcasting. So I went to college. I fell in love with radio. I fell in love with speaking. And I've realized wow, this is my thing. And I graduated and I was like, I'm going to be a DJ. And I took a hard left and said, I need money and went into sales instead. And so went into the corporate world. But always had this, always had this thing in the back of my mind of you have this defined gift, skill, whatever it is, and you're not using it. I could say that I'm using it in some other ways. So it was always kind of in the back of my mind, and really the question was if my gift is my voice, the place where you light up, right? Like this podcast is called Behind the Dreamers. And I imagine that you and everyone who you have on your show and listens to your show has something that lights them up and something that sparks them. And for me, it was always, like a message, like whether it was through my voice or whatever. And so my thought was always, how do I use this gift as a force for good? But so often I would just take the safe route. And, like I have a family, and I've always been a late bloomer. My podcast is called Late Learner. And I've always been a late bloomer. I got married. I think I met my husband at 34, married at 37, kids at 38 and 40, had an eating, like disordered eating in my early 40s. Like most people do that. It's like teenager. And just, like I'm 48 and I am starting completely from scratch and blazing a path that is not there today. And, like I could play the corporate game. I'm really good at sales and was a high performer always, and got rewarded with money and stocks and security and trips and those kind of things, really amazing people. But it never felt right. It never felt like I was fully expressed. It always felt like something I could do. And I thought, if I could do this, make the money, I have kids, I have a house and, a husband and all of that. And then I started my podcast 4 years ago. And it was like such an exciting thing that fire just keeps getting bigger for this podcast, even though the work for it also gets bigger too. As it takes
Right.
a lot to produce continuously. It's actually really easy to put out a podcast. It's challenging to continue it, and all the work that goes into publishing and creating and having compelling guests and content and things that are going to be relevant in social media and all that. So I started this podcast on the side and I just fell in love with it. And I fell in love with it so much that people would ask me, I want to build a podcast. So I launched a little podcast launch program and then an agency to help people launch, and realized that I hated it. I was good at it, but I didn't want that to be my business, even though I was just
Right.
figuring out, like, how do I just wanted like an off ramp. I wanted some kind of rocket ship to get out of where I was. So I was like trying things on the side and none of it was like resonating. And all I wanted to do was my podcast. And so it turned out where I had stumbled on, this is going to sound like a weird tangent, but it will make sense. I stumbled on a dance class. I have no dance background and just decided on a whim I wanted to try something fun. So I stumbled on this dance class and I felt like I was struck by lightning. And I was like, what is this? And it was like I was in such a stressful, high pressure, I am not in the right place in work where it felt restrictive, constrictive. It just felt like more and more this was not where I belong. And I'd take this dance class and I felt this intense rush, this release of like, wow, am I allowed to feel joy? Am I allowed to feel this good when I feel like I'm almost shaming myself to feel bad because I'm so used to like, this is just how, like the grind. And I knew it wasn't. And so that was like the opening of the podcast was the opening. The dance was like, no, you can move. You can actually take up space. You can actually, even though I was never good at dance, I'm still not good. I still am, get turned around with the moves. But I loved it so much and felt so inspired by this particular format. It's called Rebel Groove. It's a national format. I just wanted to share it with people because I'm like, good Lord, if I have been this unlocked, imagine what it could do for people. And it's got like this cult following. There are a lot of people that kind of feel that same way. And, it got to the point where work made me feel miserable. Like I did have the Sunday scaries and the Monday blues. And I was like, all right, I'm just going to suit up. So it was like everything is tense, like the armor is there. I'm just going to grind through this. And I would just be looking at the clock like, all right, it's 4:13. This ends at 4:30. Okay, I've got 17 minutes. Okay, I can do this. All right, let me just power through. And then I would do the podcast and have these magnificent, like mind expansive and thought provoking, meaningful conversations with people. and I would feel fully expressed. I would feel expansive and feel like I was fully in my element and making an impact. And then work was completely different. And so it got to the point where I was like, well, really, I went to a tarot reading and they're like, yeah, it's time to go. And I was like, okay. And so my husband and I had a come to Jesus conversation. My husband's a software engineer and very much stability minded. And he's like, how are we going to do this? I'm like, honey, just bet on me. And he's like, I don't know how I'm going to do that, but all right. So we we're this is like the hang on to your seat, like the full
Right.
throated kind of adventure where I left my job. I waited a few months till some stocks vested and left with no plan. And, it was really hard because I have so much wrapped into my value is the productivity. Like I'm a total type A personality, just get stuff done.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm the person that you count on. Like, yeah, you want it done, it'll be done in 5 seconds, and I'm going to do 45 other things. And I always prided myself on that and earning. So like productivity and earnings went away, and then
Right.
the productivity I just started spinning out. And I took the one decision I made when I left was I wasn't going to make any decisions at all. And so, my nature was like, do I just force some kind of career, try and figure out something? Or do I just let myself breathe? And I let myself breathe and started doing all kinds of crazy stuff like psychedelic assisted therapy. And I've done 2 12-hour walks and solo overnight hikes, like stuff would never do. I
Right.
just needed to get quiet so I could hear my voice and start deprogramming all of the cultural and familial, and also self-inflicted conditioning. So there's a
Mm-hmm.
long answer to your question.
No, it's good. Well, and I think you and I talked, off camera, obviously for our
Yeah.
listeners, we had a long conversation off, and I feel like so much of your stuff is a lot of there's some parallels in my journey as well. And I think it's really neat, when you, two things to this. I mean, when you get to that place where, yeah, you're burnt out and you realize that, okay, enough of this is enough of this, right? But I think
Yeah.
what's interesting is, and I never like to say I know how somebody feels, but I can feel that feeling where when you're doing something that you enjoy doing and you have that other thing weighing you down very heavily. And I don't know, I'm sensing your personality is similar to mine in a lot of ways, and that we make decisions very quickly. And it's like, when I'm done,
Yeah.
I'm done. Like, I'm done. I'm done. I can't do this any longer. And what do I need to do to move in the other direction? So I can hear you and resonate with that. And just taking that time to find yourself and do these adventures. And I'm also too married to an engineer. So I very much understand that, that very
There's
stable
a type.
security mind.
There's a type
Yes. And I scare him every day. We've been married
every
27
day.
years, and I'm sure I scare him every day of his life. He does not want to know when I
Uh-huh.
come in and say, I have an idea. Don't bring ideas.
Yeah, the tornado has arrived.
Yeah, yeah. I just have to be like, sit down. I have an idea. I just want you to sit down so I can tell you. No freaking out. Just sit down. I don't know that I'm
Yeah.
going to do it yet, but just listen. You
Yeah.
know. So, but good for you. So tell us a little bit about your podcast, because I know you've had some incredible guests on there. I've researched your stuff, and I
Yeah.
know you're doing. And you have such a great voice for the podcast. Obviously, you've taken the journalism and all that. I love it. Love it. I always have fun with my friends that have journalism backgrounds, because they just have an art for it. So tell us
Say
about your
something.
podcast a little bit and some of these
Read a
guests you.
dictionary.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. So my my podcast started 4 years ago. It had a different name. It actually had 4 different names, but it previously was called Culture Changers. And so my thought back then was I started to notice or experience a lot of really profound things at in a window of time, and that might look like education. Like I was volunteering at an inner city school, and maternal health care, where I had a really traumatic birth and then a miraculous healing birth, and creating the difference between the two, and understanding what the hospital system is like, and the maternal health care system is so non-mom friendly, or baby friendly. It's more hospital and insurance
Right.
friendly. And like the political
Right.
discourse, like there were just all of these things that were happening that I was like, I don't want to, like voting once every 2 years isn't enough. Like, and also, even if a vote, you have to like get other people to vote. And I was trying to figure out, how do I make an impact? And so I started the podcast where I would interview people whose work breaks convention and changes how the rest of us live. So I'd interview people like Seth Godin and Jesse Itzler and Mariel Hemingway, the Academy Award nominated actress,
Mhm.
and legendary family, and all of these people. Which, if you know who they are, they're big in their circles, and if you don't know who they are, just know they're big in their circles in their and I was so proud to have these meaningful conversations. But when I left my job, people started to lean all the way in. And I would get messages left and right from men and women. I primarily have a female audience, but I would get a lot of messages of people that would say, "Oh my God, I wish I could do that. I wish I could do that. Go you." And so it was like people lean all the way in to figure out, can she do this? Can I do this? So I'm like the corporate girl, like that is turning a corner in a very different way. And it almost is like a test study. Can I make a great living doing something I love? Or do I have to, is my only route doing something I hate to make money? And there's like a big long story with that, which we don't need to go into today. But yeah, so it has evolved into way more of a self-discovery journey. And what I found is that I would have the most incredible and interesting guests, but the ones that resonated the most were the ones that were personal, not just to me, but like personal, like setting boundaries or belonging or making adult friends, or even topics on sex and like sex after sexual assault. I mean, 1 out of 4
Yeah.
women reported have that. And nobody talks about, like,
Right.
what is it like? Like, can you have a healthy sex life after, your trust and all of those were violated in some other way? So, starting to have these really important conversations, I started to realize that it wasn't about culture changers. And by the way, nobody is Googling, how do I be a culture changer? And so I realized in August, um, I had to do a rebrand. So I have gone on another odyssey to figure out, how do I rename this podcast? And so I did at the beginning of this year. It's called Late Learner, and it is an ode to the late bloomer. And I come across people that, like, I would say my audience is primarily like 30 to 55, 60-ish. And normally there are people that come that are like, the majority of my audience are professional, very often burnt out women who have climbed the corporate ladder. They've done everything they were supposed to do. They thought they should do, I should say. They, have comforts typically, and they get to this point and they're like, why am I not happy? And why aren't I like, they feel
Right.
ashamed. Like, I have what I need, but why isn't it enough? And so I live in that spot of like, what if you can? And so the question is, well, I'm a lawyer. I made this decision when I was 18 years old. I'm so burnt out. I'm in my 40s and I'm an attorney. What am I going to do? Quit and, become a yoga instructor? Maybe. But I think there is a lot of ego built around it. There is a lot of investment. It's like
Hmm.
the sunk cost. There's also the lifestyle and all of that. And so the
Right.
question, and where this discovery breathes, is, what can you do to find fulfillment, whether it is to stay in that career and maybe pull back on the schedule? But for me, I think it, not for me, but like my message is, how do you reconnect back into yourself and hear your voice versus like deprogramming all the cultural conditioning and figure out, what do you want? And if you can maybe like look at the overscheduling and reevaluate what needs to go and what needs to be reprioritized. If you now hear your voice and realize what you need is something different. And that's where I live. And that's where my podcast lives. I have I'm launching Atlanta wellness retreats. And so I'm putting together these wellness experiences for people that are looking to apply some of these things in real time, and not just for these experiences, but to have tools that they can take into their normal everyday life. And that's kind of where I live and breathe these days.
I
That's
love
my
that,
mission.
Allison.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
I love that. And I think that it's so interesting because I think the big message that I'm hearing, and I talk about flow, in our lives, and flow
Yes.
being that thing that we enjoy doing, that when we do it, we can lose track of time. We can get so wrapped, whether that's your podcast or it's building these retreats or it's your rebel dancing, which by the way, I work out every day, but I just joined this groove thing. You probably have heard of it. And I am like loving it. It's dancing and I just do it in my living room. And it's
Nice.
funny because I just started doing it, not because I needed another exercise program. I taught aerobics for many years and I run and do all my other things, but I did it because I wanted to have something that I could use kind of as a just free spirited kind of flow
Yeah, just
thing.
free
Like, you know what I
movement.
mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, just
Freedom.
movement, not to be like, I got to be like particular
Yeah.
about a move and all that. So I had to tell you that. But I think the big thing here, the big message in this, what you're talking about, and I think this is what resonates with me because it's exactly where I'm sitting in my life right now, is this place where sometimes we see this picture, like, and this was my life too. There's this picture on the outside where everything looks perfect, right? Everything's looking right from the outside in, but inside, the person internally has not found what that flow looks like in their life, and they're dying inside, right? And I think that
Mm-hmm.
you and I are both kind of spreading that same message, because a lot of the people that I work with, and even the program that I'm building right now, is really about how do we help you find that thing that is in alignment with what you're doing. And I don't know if that's going to
Mm,
be a side hustle. I don't know if that's going to be a side thing like you and I do a podcast. I don't know if that's going
right.
to be you leaving your corporate job to go do these things like you're doing. I don't know what that looks like. But we have to find what that flow thing is. We have to find that piece that we're missing. Otherwise, yes, you have that prestigious job, you have that great family, you have the luxuries, and you go to the end and you never find that happiness. And I think that's really what this comes down to, is helping people find that was whatever it is they're supposed to be doing, that piece of what they're supposed to be doing. And that takes exploration. It takes a lot of digging and self-discovery and getting honest with yourself and removing a lot of the stigmas that you're talking about, that, hey, I have a degree in law, I should be doing law school. And what do we know at 18 years old? We know nothing. You know what I mean? And
You,
so many people get
I
their
wonder about
degrees
this.
and they go for years.
But I wonder about this too, that I think what you're saying and what I have found is that some of it only starts with permission to explore. And so, like, we're so
Right.
caught in these routines because we've overscheduled ourselves, our kids, our dogs, our everything, where we've overscheduled ourselves so much that we've left no room. And so I remember I used to work
Mm-hmm.
out at 5 to 5:30 a.m. with a trainer. And that was the only time I had for a workout. From 6 o'clock on was dedicated to my family, to work, to the podcast, and that's it. And I would just be so tired, but every moment was scheduled out, And so even like scrolling was like an escape, like scrolling was a
Right.
quick escape. That's why we are so distracted, because we're kind of getting out of our body, like some of it is painful when you don't want to be in this meeting that should have been an email anyway, and there's
Right.
just so much of it. And so I think I wonder about your thoughts on permission, about giving ourselves permission to do the frivolous, what you might think is frivolous
Yeah.
or less priority as all the other things that you've kind of scheduled in.
Yeah. Well, I'm a big pro fan of exploration. And I think that, it's something I have these conversations with my kids, because my middle child is in that place and talking about not knowing what to do. Right. And all words to her all the time is, how do you know what you don't like or you do like if you do not test the waters? You have to give yourself permission. I think the stigma comes because we equate a bad decision as failure. And I think we have to move away from this idea that something that doesn't work for us doesn't necessarily mean it was failure, right? A bad decision does not always equate a failure. It's a learning moment, right? If we approach every situation as there's something to be gained, and I don't care what that situation is, if there's something to be gained, right? We're either going to win or we're going to learn. That's the way I say it. John Maxwell always talks about that, right? Sometimes you win, sometimes you learn. That's how I look at everything. And I think when we go with that mind frame, I think it pulls away the stigma and it allows us the opportunity to say, you know what, I'm going to explore. And this is a topic that I have with a lot of my clients, even because they'll say, well, I don't have time to do that. And my words to them always are, you don't have time not to. Like, really, you need to explore.
Mm-hmm.
It needs to be vitamins for the soul. You need to be willing to say, if something is speaking to me and it keeps showing up, like it keeps coming to me, right? I'm just going to go try something. I don't know what that is. Is it going to take a karate class? Is it taking a dance class? Is it going into journalism, take a journalism class? How do we know, right? Until we explore. And I think we just have to remove the failure with the decision, remove that barrier.
I think some of it, though, is also the ego side of things too. And so I think
agree.
for me,
Yeah.
so I don't know when this will air, but we're in February. And so I have deemed February Fun February. And the reason why is because I'm not really fun. I don't do a lot of things that are fun. The dance is fun, but I bake it into my schedule now. And I started to realize, and even now, like I'm 9 months out of this. And so this is always evolving, right? And I noticed that there's so many things that I stopped doing that I enjoyed or were enjoyable. And so one might be like I would never sit at a coffee shop and just sit there. Like I don't know what people would
Right.
do. Or even like I know this one kind of hit me like a ton of bricks when I was trying to figure out how do I add more fun into my life. I stopped going to lunch with friends. And so, like
Mm,
in my mind, I was like, somebody would ask me to lunch, and I'm like, I don't want to because I don't want to interrupt all the work that I need to do. And, I want to, like it's 1 hour of time. So I'd be like, it wouldn't have any value, which is crazy. These are my friends,
sure.
And
Right.
so it because I wasn't present. And so I stopped like even like lighting a candle in my office or enjoying a cup of tea. I love tea. I'm like a tea fanatic.
Me
But
too.
there were certain things like I have this heated neck wrap and that it immediately signals my shoulders to just relax. Yes, you have it too. It's great for your period too if you you can put
Well,
it there.
I had it on my neck. I had it on my neck a few minutes ago. I just didn't want to be in the
Right.
podcast with it sitting around
Yes,
my neck.
but I wouldn't put like sometimes I feel like I have not earned it. And so like doing
Yeah.
yoga in my house, like I don't practice dance in my house because I feel like I haven't earned it because I have other stuff to do. Or I feel I judge myself that it's too frivolous for me to
Mm,
prioritize because I need to do the podcast things and all the creative and I need to make sure. And so
right.
now I'm like, we got to stop all of that. And I'm giving myself space and I do something called unplanned plans. It's like my favorite thing to do. And so I had a friend come and visit. And it's actually a guy who's been on my podcast 3 times. We never met in person. He lives in New York. He was going to be in Atlanta for a speech he was doing. So I went to his speech. I took him back to the airport. We had a little bit of time to kill. And I was like, Chris, I'm going to take you somewhere fun. And so I took him to my favorite tea place. And we're like, all right, we're going to, we have like 30 minutes before we have to go to the airport. And he's like, I see there are bird scooters, like those electric scooters that are right on
Right.
what's called the Atlanta Beltline, which is like this paved pathway. And he's like, can we ride on those? And I was like, of course. So we went and we just started, to have this experience where I'm like kind of telling him about the history, about, where it came from and all this stuff. So we're riding around. He's like, oh my God, I've been here before, but I've never seen it like this. So we passed this like outdoor bar and it had like a fireplace and a fire pit. And it was like 4 o'clock on Friday. He's like, can we stop and get a beer? And I was like, of course. So we did. We met up with people, and I started to notice, and this I love doing this, but it is like my pure joy to do this with other people, is I started to notice his energy would just go up and up and up, but it was like an energy of pure joy, of just, wow, like this wonder and this spark of just giving yourself space that, yes, I could have been doing a million other things. And usually when I have friends, I've got like an expiration, like, hey, I got to bounce, but I was
Right.
like, no, I'm going to take this time and I'm just going to see what unfolds. And so unplanned plans always bring magic when you have that spirit. And so I would invite fun. If anybody listening is like me, where you don't prioritize fun, like, why do we stop dancing after college? Why do we stop painting? If you ask a whole group of 5-year-olds, can you paint? Can you sing? Can you dance? They'll all say yes. But if you ask those same people when they're 25, most of them will say, no, I can't do it, because they're
Right.
afraid. So why do we
Right.
stop? So I don't know.
Yeah.
I just got wild, girl.
I love it. No, and I think, you know what? I think you have to plan it until you get to a place where you don't plan it, right? Like, I think the idea is to get unconscious competent about it. That's what I tell my people when I'm working with them.
Say that again.
It's like
Unconscious competent.
unconscious competent. Like, you drive your car, right? You don't have to be
I love
really
that. Yeah.
like paying attention because you just drive. You know how to drive, right? So
Yeah.
I always say, if we didn't grow up doing all of these things when we were little, and now we realize, hey, I want to implement all these things in our life now, and there's kind of this immunity to change, right? Like, we start resisting that change, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so this is why I talk, like how do I say this? I'm a very disciplined but not disciplined person. So probably like I like a little bit of discipline, but I also like to have not all discipline. I don't want everything so rigid that I can't breathe, right? So I have to just purposely tell myself and make it part of my day. Like, my morning routine is like my morning routine. I get up, I have my green tea, I eat my breakfast, feed my animals, do my workout, plan my day. That wasn't always the case, Alice. I mean, there were many years I slept in the morning. Even when my kids were little, I'd go back to bed. I have certain things, but I had to kind of get to a place where I was like, you know what, these things are important to me. I really like them. Like, they make me feel better about myself. I feel better about my day. Like, it just gives me that little bit of serenity, that time to be in my own space with quiet, And so that's how I always kind of say it. It's like, yes, I love your unplanned plans. I think that's great, because we do have to sometimes stop planning everything out. But sometimes I think when we're trying to implement these things, if we can just put a little bit of a structured time and say, you know what, this time I'm going to have time to do whatever I feel like doing, whatever that is. And that's going to be my one day a week. I'm just going to do whatever I want to do, whether it's going to be to go sit at the cafe, go to lunch with my friends, shop, whatever we're going to do, and just make it your time, because otherwise, yes, we feel guilty about it, right? We have so much to do. We feel guilty.
So guilty. Yeah, we feel so guilty. But the moment you say yes to one new thing, let's say one new thing that'll bring you joy or nourishment, like mental and spiritual nourishment, whatever that might be, you start to realize that the energy that you have starts to regenerate instead of deplete. And that is like the drug, right?
Yeah.
Like that regenerative energy of just saying yes to you. And, like, it's hard because you feel guilty, especially if you've got a spouse that's expecting something, children that are expecting something else. And when you kind of shake it up, there is a little bit of guilt that at least I have experienced of just, can I do this? Am I being too selfish? But I think the reward of just regenerating energy, I mean, what other resource, is more powerful? It's, like just having energy with the time that you have, I think is pretty magnificent.
Yeah, I think you show up better too. I think when you make the time to really, take time for yourself, you just show up so much better for everybody else too. And it ends up not being so much, about when you really can see that, then you realize, hey, when I'm whole and I'm healthy and I'm feeling good and I'm doing things that are adding value to my life, then I can give to other people and add value to their lives and show up differently for them too. And I think it takes time to get to that place. And it's funny because my kids are all grown now. My youngest is 18. So I'm kind of like, listen, kiddos, I did the mom thing. I was your mom. I raised you. Some of these decisions you're going to have to make on your own. I'm not cleaning it all up, and mom needs time, so leave me alone. I think
Right.
get there sometimes, But I'm excited
Yes.
for you, Allison. I think you're doing good stuff. And
Thanks.
so, what do you got coming up? Anything exciting that you're going to be doing next? Anything kind of crazy, fun?
Oh, so much. I'm launching my first retreat on February 18th in Atlanta. It's called Calm in the Chaos. So it's going to be more of a mindful approach that will include movement. It'll include nature, meditation, and also a tea ceremony that I've partnered with my favorite tea company. And so that's happening. But then I'm gonna build out some of the other retreats that are going to be bigger and in more exotic places. So that's been exciting. I also just launched, as of today, actually, a consultant offering where I would custom design or co-design a plan for people that are feeling burnt out and they're trying to figure out, like, how do I apply this? Like, you can get the information anywhere, but it's hard to, like, be accountable. How do I apply it? And so I now have that offering available as well. But yeah, they're always like, you can ask me at any time, what's new and exciting? And it's always something. So I'm going to climb the tallest peak in Georgia, probably in the next few weeks by myself. It's like a 5.5 hour hike, and just be quiet. And I may take a couple days where I'm going to tell my husband, and my kids, like, hey, I'm going to be leaving. I don't know where I'm going, and I'm going to be safe, but I'll be back soon, like in the next couple of days, and just see where the road takes me and just get quiet. So that is the biggest challenge for me, is being quiet and still, because I'm such a doer and have all of these ideas. But I think it's time to, like, reground and go within, because I think I tend to get to a place where I'm asking everybody else, like, what are the insights? Tell me what to do. I don't know. I'm brand new at the entrepreneur thing, and I kind of give my power away, where I think the power is actually, if I listen to myself, that I can hear it. And so the intuitive part of me is getting louder and louder. And, my job is to respond to that call so that it gets bigger and bigger and it becomes clearer. And that's what I'm really working on. If we're being honest, of just kind of, it's like the muddy window that I'm just wiping it down so I can see again.
Yep. Yep. And then sometimes that's what you have to do, right? I mean, I feel like we all kind of go through this in different stages and of our lives where it's like I was telling somebody the other day, because I'm working with a mentor, and it's like, 20 years that over 23 years I've been an entrepreneur. And it's like, I finally have a clear picture of what I'm trying to do. Like, I've muddled through everything and kind of done what you talked about, like a lot of that stuff, and had to
Yeah.
regroup and really get the clarity around what am I trying to do? I know what my message has been all along, but I haven't been really clear on how to articulate that. And it's now finally coming together. But there's been a lot of mentors and a lot of, wrong turns and bad decisions and scary moments, that I've had to embrace. And I think that's what it's all about. It's the journey. We're
What is
learning
next
along
for
the
you,
way as we
Jennifer?
go.
What's next for you?
Getting my program out. The program. I'm getting that program out. That's what I'm working on right now. That's going to be probably my big final thing I'm going to do, because it's like 23 years of content, just really, all the mentors, all the work I've done, the personal work, the business
Yeah.
acumen coming together. And it's really a lot about what you and I are talking about right now. It's how to
Yeah.
help. It's going to be for female entrepreneurs. And it's really about how do we help them maybe shave off some of the time, not have to take as long as I did to figure this stuff out. We know we're all on our own journey, but if there's a lot of psychology behind it, and you and I have kind of some similar paths, just the business acumen and all of that. But I think so much of what we do in business is that we either have a lot of the business, but we don't plan, or we have the plan, but we don't have the psychology behind it. Like we're missing, this is like three parts. We're missing pieces within these three parts. And so that's what I'm hoping to kind of bring together, is to say, okay, maybe you have the business acumen, but you don't have all the psychology part of down, but how we're evolving as as adults every day through this journey that we're going through. Right. And so that's going to be the end. I don't know that I'll be excited. I don't know that I'm going to be doing much after that.
Well, good. Good luck.
Yeah, thank you. So, Allison, this has been fun. You are an amazing individual. I love your energy. I love all your free, you're moving from this all structured to kind of being a little free spirited. I can totally understand that, because I'm a very structured, and like I said, I have to find those moments where I'm like, we got to have some fun sometimes. It can't always be serious, right? So I love that about you.
Thanks.
If our audience wants to get in touch with you and learn a little bit more about you and your journey and kind of follow along with what you're doing, where do you want us to send them?
AllisonHare.com, hair like the rabbit, Allison with 2 L's and an I. And then I'm probably most active on Instagram, Allison__hair. Thank you.
Okay. We'll make sure too, when this goes out, that we'll get the links in there and get you tagged and all that good stuff so they can come find you.
Thanks, Jennifer. This was so fun.
Yeah, and congratulations and cheers on your upcoming climb that you're going to do. And these retreats sound amazing. You'll have to keep me in the loop on your retreats and stuff, what you've got going on with that. We can share it with our community too.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
All right. And we do want to say to our listeners, of course, if you enjoy our show, please be sure you go check us out on Facebook, iTunes, hit that subscribe button on YouTube so we can keep sharing all these amazing stories and these amazing people with you. And I do want to leave you guys with a final parting thought. In order to live the extraordinary, you have to start. And every start begins with a decision. You guys take care, be safe, be kind to one another. We will see you next time.